Hey, this is Jennifer Walden. Thanks so much for joining me for Mix's Sound for Film and Television Award Season virtual event. We are talking about director-producer Shaka King's feature film, Judas and the Black Messiah, which is having its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival. I love Sundance. Then it hits both the theaters and HBO Max's streaming platform on February 12th. The film is set in the late 60s, and it's a historical drama about the life and assassination of Black Panther Party leader Fred Hampton. Here to talk about the film's sound is Oscar-winning re-recording mixer Skip Lievsay.
Hi.
Supervising sound editor Rich Bologna.
Hey.
And the RIAA Gold and Platinum Award-winning Marlowe Taylor, who was the production sound mixer on the film.
Yay. Hello, everybody.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Shaka King, he co-wrote the screenplay, was a producer on the film, and he directed it. I mean, it's hard to be that deeply involved and not have a clear vision of how best to tell the story, or at least have a really good idea of how you want to tell it. Rich, when you sat down to talk with director King, what were some of his initial ideas for how to use sound to help tell the story?
Well, it was interesting because, we started, I think, the week we had to shut down for COVID. So it was all kind of a little frantic at the beginning, but it was interesting because, we obviously were working remote, and Shaka, I'd screened the film and kind of had my own ideas, and Shaka gave me a pretty robust list of notes that he had. And they were interesting because they weren't kind of the obvious things. They were like very, kind of more of the Foley related things, and just things I think that were bugging him during the edit that they didn't want to spend time cutting with the picture editor. So I kind of had my laundry list, and I got through those, and he was definitely on board with all that. And then I think from there on out, he sort of just let us run with it. And to his credit, like, he gave us a lot of freedom, and I'd say 90% of the time he was on board with our ideas. And so he I think has a very unique disposition in directing for sound, because he has very specific things that he'll always, from the moment we started to the moment we final mixing, they were always kind of the same things that would pop up that he wanted to get really right. And outside of that, he gave us a really long leash, which is great, and we started early. So it was cool in that the initial tracks that came over, like the guide tracks and stuff, were very, very minimal. So we sort of set the tone. And I think, to his credit, he gave us like a lot of trust from the get-go. And then, once they get used to that stuff being in the edit, we can kind of fine tune things and work on the things that matter, rather than like fixing stuff or getting too attached to temp sound or any of that. So he has a very, very mature, I know he's still kind of early in his career, but he's got such good instincts, and he's super mature with his approach to sound, and he really loves it. Like, that's the other treat with working with somebody like that, is that he knows how much we can bring to it, and he really enjoys the process. So it was a treat.
So Fred Hampton, he delivers this impassioned speech to a crowd of followers, and he says, "I am a revolutionary," and the crowd repeats it back to him.
It's not a question of violence or non-violence. It's a question of resistance to fascism or non-existence within fascism. You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom. I said, hey, a revolutionary. Hey, a revolutionary. Hey, a revolutionary. Hey, a revolutionary. Let me hear the people beat. Let me hear the people beat.
So Marlowe, what was your approach to capturing actor Daniel Kaluuya during the speech? Were you capturing a feed from that podium mic that he uses to address the crowd, as well as having like a lav on him?
Well, we did multiple things because Daniel was such a dynamic actor. You know, he would go from yelling to calm to whisper. And so I had no idea. So there was the podium mic, there was a plant hidden on the podium mic. He was live, then there was a boom on him, and then there was mics throughout the crowd. So initially they were going to just have the crowd be silent, have Daniel deliver. And I just ran up to the director, which he spoke earlier about how Shaka King is. He's so open to things. I said, you know, can we please just do one take where the crowd actually reacts to Daniel, almost like a concert? You know, I think that'll give Daniel's even more energy and he'll just really get into it. Which later on down the road, when I had a moment, like it was just a huddle of us three, Daniel, Shaka King, and myself, he just said, that was magnificent. He said, that's what an artist feels like in that moment, you know, where the crowd responds. He said, that was just the most energetic, like boost of energy I've ever had. So, and I'm glad we did what we did because he got louder to where he lost his voice. So we only got through a certain amount of them where then his voice was gone, but the crowd going back and forth was really the most motivating thing for him, he said. And he said he's never experienced anything like that before. So that was awesome.
And were you able to set up mics and capture some of that crowd to feed those elements to the post sound team?
Yeah, we were able to capture the crowd, and you know, we had two booms going and a couple more mics set up on some XY things going on. So we were able to capture the crowd as well, which helped in the final for those guys to do their magic. And from the notes that I got, you know, from post and from both of those guys was it worked really good. But you know, I can only say from sitting there at the cart as a sound mixer, you know, when you're getting the scene and you're capturing the element of that scene, really when you get like goosebumps or makes you really nervous. And just to kind of understand, like, what was this, you know, what was Fred Hampton like back then, you know, like, and so to hear Daniel do it so well for me and my generation, it's like, wow, you know, and I think we got it, you know, but you're always nervous, you know, but once I got like the positive feedback from posting that we got it for him, I was really, you know, exhilarated about it. It was awesome.
And so on the post sound side, Rich, how did you help to elevate the emotion of that scene through sound?
I mean, it's funny because it's like if you have a performance like Daniel's, you know, it's pretty teed up. Like as long as he's acting at that level, you know, we just have to kind of keep our heads down and make his performance shine. So it's kind of easy if you have such a good performance in that regard. That scene, I think it's funny because it's like, you know, Skip and I were kind of talking about it this morning, and I don't even really remember. It was almost like a fever dream where, like, we just kind of put our heads down and plowed through that scene, and all of a sudden, like, we looked up and we were like, "Well, we're in that room all of a sudden." And it's funny because it's like I sat with that scene for so long. I mean, our edit period was extended, so I'd been looking at that for months and months, and um, it was interesting because Skip, I think, purposefully knew that how big of a scene that is for the movie. I mean, it's a very like gravitational scene for the whole movie. So I think his good instincts were correct in terms of like really giving it the love it deserves. So we did do a lot. I mean, we did get pretty granular with the mix. I mean, we did some Atmos stuff and we had a lot of fun with it. But ultimately, like we just hammered through it, and all of a sudden it felt like you were in the room. And I don't even think Shaka had a note. So I think Marlowe.
No, he had a note. He said, "Wow, that sounds fantastic."
That was the note. Yeah, and I mean, you know, the order of the day is we just wanted to feel like put the audience in that time and space, and I think it worked. I mean, it really feels like an enveloping scene, and Marlowe mentioned Goosebumps. I've seen that scene many times, and I kind of always have the same reaction, which is like, wow, you know.
And did you record any like loop group to enhance what was captured on set?
We did, but you know, a lot of that scene is Skip and Marlowe in terms of there's I don't really know what magic they did, but there's a percussion track through it and there's great crowds in production. And I would say, you know, 80% of that scene is shot practically.
Mhm.
So
including the music.
exactly. And we did do Loop Group, but it really is a supporting character. I mean, I had fun because like I ended up putting stuff on the ceiling, which is kind of a weird thing to do with Loop Group, but like you definitely feel like you're in a 3D space in that scene. But it all kind of just gelled. Like once Skip did his pass, I just sort of filled in the blanks with the group, and they did a great. I mean, I should give props to the Loop Group because they did an amazing job in this movie, and it was no small task because there's like the Panthers, there's some, you know, kind of hillbilly characters, there's like the Latin gang, so they really did a lot with the diversity of background characters, and they killed that scene. But that the rally scene in particular is really a testament to like the production sound, and we you know, we just filled in the gaps with post.
And so let's look at the mixing side of this scene. Skip, what were some of the creative choices that you made during the mix to make this scene as powerful as it could be? Like, how were you able to shape the soundtrack to maximize the impact of Fred's speech?
Well, I hate to admit it, but I approached it in a pretty mechanical way. I sorted out all of the various units, and the first thing I dealt with was getting Fred Hampton's voice to be sort of continuous through the whole scene. So, and I had a bunch of different types of different distance recordings, and I got them all to sound like they were coming from the same person. But then I shut that off, and I did the same task for the crowd sounds from the production track with Rich offline, so just from production. And I doubled some things up, and we had some multiple takes to fatten out areas where we didn't have as much coverage maybe. And we had some added sweeteners of reactions and chanting. And so I got that all to sound kind of like a believable layer of crowd. And then the People's Beat, I only had a little bit of track, so I just looped that and made that fit. And then there was an added track that was provided by the music department. And I just filtered that and reverbed that so it matched the production track so I could use them interchangeably. And then Rich, we turned Rich's side on, the sound effects in the group, and we played it through, and we said, okay, sounds good.
I think
really, it's because the production track was so spectacular.
Yeah.
Really, the performance is amazing. The reactions are fantastic. The size of the crowd was perfect, of course, because it was authentic, and you know, it was kind of like a dream scene. And I got to say, it's one of those things. Like I believe really that when you start working on a film, you should always work on the hardest thing first.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, if you can get that to work and get people to be happy, usually that just turns the corner. And that was the hardest thing to do in the movie. And Rich and I sorted it out right away. And the rest of it was kind of a pleasure and a dream, really, from that point on.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I think the only technical obstacle or treatment that we put on it from the get-go is like once we had everything up, it did have a bit of, you know, there was a lot of stuff going on. So I think both Skip and I ended up just carving out like some low mids or something just to make it all glue together. But really it kind of ran itself in a way. It didn't have, like we kept saying in playbacks, like it didn't have a harshness to it, which you would think it would, given kind of the robustness of tracks that we had to deal with. But it's a pleasurable.
Yeah, we fooled ourselves. We thought it was going to be, you know, way too loud and harsh, but actually it sounded terrific. So
yeah,
it was strangely when you're dealing with
Thanks,
things.
guys.
All you, man.
Yeah, man.
It was.
Thank you, guys.
Oh wow, Skip, Rich, I just want to thank you both. It's, you know, the one thing I want to interject really quick is that particular scene was a moment where I had to make sure because the feeling of it, I had to look down and be like, oh my gosh, is everything rolling? You know, because all these tracks are going and I'm pushing the faders and I'm getting the goosebump feeling. I'm just going, oh my gosh. And I look down and say, okay, I'm rolling, you know, so to understand that. And the first take was just a simple take, you know, Daniel went up and he did stuff and the church was quiet. I ran up to Shaka and said, can we please have the crowd interject with them? And then they said, sure. And then once they did it one time, it was like, it's the first time I'd ever just really seen Shaka be like he was just like, oh my gosh, you know, and do it again. And we're going to do this. And then Shaka just gave him a little bit more direction and then just told Daniel, just, you do you. And then Daniel did. And he got louder and louder. So there was no way for us to go and like really adjust stuff. We tried to do the most we could because everything we run is electrosonic. So you know, tapping stuff to turn stuff down and, you know, to balance out stuff. And I thought I was getting too much, but it's really rewarding to hear from Rich and Skip that things work because, you know, that was a moment where I only had that one moment.
Yeah.
To get it. We couldn't interrupt it because the engine was going, you know, and I tried to get more of the musicians playing, but they were only allowed to play like those few seconds. Give me the drummer's beat, boom, 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 and then they stopped.
Yeah.
Our time, we were in that church all day, and it was over 350 people in that church, you know, of all nationality, all going nuts. So it just was really, I mean, you know, and just to hear that from Rich, like you guys just totally made my year. I'm just happy right now, man. I mean, you know, I'm just a sound mixer, happy guy from Ohio, man. You know? So, you know,
Marlowe, have you gotten to see that scene finished, or you haven't seen the final product, right?
I just got through my guild, through CAS, I just got our screener.
Oh, cool.
So my wife wants to do something before I leave this weekend. So we're going to do some, but I need to see it in the theater.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we have the 5.1 and we have the 7-inch screen and, you know, but I really want to see it in theater. So I really just, because I remember when Rich was like, Marlowe, you got to see this, you know, so I want to see it that way. And so I don't know if I'm going to travel back from, you know, from my show and come back and see it in the theater with the family again, you know, but it's got to happen. So
Cool.
Yeah.
I had a real quick question for the mixers. You know, because this is having its world premiere at Sundance and the whole COVID thing, and they're like, you know, streaming it, but then they're also playing it at drive-ins. Did you guys make like a special drive-in mix?
Yeah, that's one that doesn't really sound very good. It sounds exactly as good as your car radio, actually.
Exactly.
I went to a drive-in this year of the David Byrne movie, and it was really fun. And I miss drive-ins. I wish we had a couple thousand more of them. I much prefer going to a drive-in than sitting at home and watching it at home.
That's what we could do. We could just put a car right here and mix in the car.
Yeah, this is a car, basically. It's a really big car. But the one thing about the drive-in thing is when people are excited and they cheer, it's a car horn. Hank, hank,
Yes.
hank, hank.
Nice. Well, you know, you did talk about like the Atmos mix, so I was wondering, like, okay, so there's probably like a streaming mix, an Atmos mix, and then maybe a drive-in mix.
That don't encourage.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right.
Try to get the theater mix.
Exactly. That'll start showing up on deliverables lists for sure.
Oh boy. Oh man. Sorry. Marlowe, you hail from Cleveland, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So what was it like to be back there in your old stomping ground and recording this film?
Oh, you know, something was really awesome because we had just came from doing a Liam Neeson show in New Mexico and coming back home. So it's nice when you can actually go to your own. I mean, I'm more than sure, like, you know, Rich and Skip probably have the luxury of always being in their own space for the most part, you know, going to work. But it's nice when you're at home because it seems like it gave me a fresher mind to think about the next day. And if I needed to get some extra cables or a snake for other mics, I could always go to the studio because I run a recording studio too. I always go to the studio and get extra things and then bring them to set. So it's nice to be at home because everything I have the world on my trailer, but you know, there's still little things I like to go to the studio to get. So it's nice when you're at home. And our city doubles for a lot of movies. So, you know, that's the cool thing. It's, you know, we double for a lot of different movies, even like, you know, LA. We have the LA looking, you know, scenery. So it's nice, you know, it kind of spoils you to be at home sometimes.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, you guys probably work on New York films all the time over there, Skip and Rich.
Well, yes and no.
That's true.
And also, I get banished off to London and Los Angeles fairly often. So I can't say I look forward to going for months at a time, but I sure enjoy the first few weeks.
Cool. So I just have one final question for you guys. What do you hope the audience takes away from their sonic experience of Judas and the Black Messiah?
I mean, for me, I've remember like my mom and dad talking about the Black Panther Party. I think this movie and the magic that Rich and Skip did and how they glued together what I got in the Mari Clay and in the war. I call it a war. I always look at sound as a war. I think a person watching it is going to go right back then. They're going to feel exactly where this guy was coming from and what was his real mission. And I think dynamically, I capture that. At least I felt I did because I got my regular goosebumps feelings that I always feel when I'm getting something right. And that's what I really want them to feel. I want them to feel the power and the care and the concern and what, Fred Hampton was really about. And not to hate Lakeith, not to give spoiler alerts, but, you know, he didn't really know and he was just trying to look out for himself, and I think we capture that too because he was very soft spoken and very whispery, so really hard to get him up, make him sound his normal full self. But I believe that when you watch it, it should take you there, and from the trailer and just from what they've done, it's there. So the coloring and everything, it's is amazing. I think it's going to be an outstanding film and release, and I'm just so angry at COVID because I'm just so angry at COVID. But it is what it is still. And I think no matter how people watch the screening, you're going to get that effect.
Yeah, and I mean, just going off that, I think a big thing that I wanted to emphasize was authenticity. I mean, it's like it's always fun to do period stuff, and this is definitely, that was something that I tried to really get right, is just putting you in 1968 Chicago. It's always fun to do like period cars and all of that. To me, it's funny because it's like one big obstacle, which is kind of flabbergasting, is sound effects libraries. It was just hard to find the right mood, and there's not really, like, if you're searching for crowd effects and stuff, there's not many like Black people in those libraries.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we're starting from scratch in a way, and that made it much more fun because it's like we really crafted, like, the loop group was super important, like, so I really wanted to put you into that place, and I think we got to a good place. And for the most part, it's a really naturalistic soundtrack. I mean, there's nothing really too fancy going on. I mean, I did do a little bit with the character of Lakeith, and kind of there's a couple of moments that are a little surreal and impressionistic with him. But for the most part, I just really wanted to make you feel like you're in that place and time. And I think we got there. What do you think, Skip?
Well, having lived through that period myself, and from a rather distant perspective, a white kid growing up north of New York City, and the kind of urgency that we felt, and the helplessness, really. I mean, all we could really do is what we could gather ourselves together on the day and then watch the nightly news and see what was really happening. It really felt local, even though, because the only thing we really saw was the nightly news version. And then seeing this film, the way Shaka chose to make it very close up and intimate, and it felt really kind of neighborhood-y, as is projected in many scenes in the film, where it was like something was happening on a neighborhood level. And it was happening in all neighborhoods, but because, it was back in that time, we didn't know that it was happening in all the neighborhoods at the same time. And I found it to be completely enthralling, and brought me right back to that period. I mean, as to the degree that I could be brought back to that period. I wasn't obviously in the same neighborhood, but just the same. It was so important to us on that day, and it really feels like the movie it's just as important to this film as it was to everyone in that period, in that time.
One of those scenes were actually shot literally 5 blocks from where I grew up and where my studio still resides right now. Literally right around the corner. You know, that was the scene for it was what we shot the very first day, where they all get out the car and they go into, I can't remember what it was, but it was an all white like militia.
Oh, yeah. Right.
That's right down the street, man. So
wow.
yeah, so I got a lot of like, what's going on? And, you know, oh my God, you know, so that was exciting. Had to answer a lot of neighborhood questions, you know, but it was such an honor to, you know, to work on the show. And Shaka King, you know, just in closing, was just so pleasant. I've never, you know, had the luxury to have a director like that you could just run up to anytime if you need to and ask something. And he just, like, you know, even like Rich said, he'd be like, well, sure, Marlowe, if you think that'll, you know, work, well, that's better, sure, you know, and let you go through with it. And then when you're done with it, he's like, oh, yeah, that was really cool, you know.
Yeah, I second that. I mean, it's a rare thing where you really get to work with such great people, and you love. I mean, I think Skip and I just both love this movie, like having worked on it or not. So it's easy to like put a lot of, you know, extra effort into something that you believe in, and this is one of those. So
yep, amen to that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Marlowe, Skip, Rich, thank you guys so much for sharing your thoughts with me today, and best of luck this award season.
thanks.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Happy
See you.